Google Images.
Google Images.
I could have made one like paint. Like, do you want the? Yeah, I was gonna say.
Mike's probably up there. Right here.
I know, but there were two. Do you just want to? Do you just
There are
want?
no two. There's only
Do you just
one.
want to hold like this then?
That one
You
doesn't
can
work?
you can share it. That one's not hooked up to that.
So we're like
So you
here,
can share it. Yeah. Yeah, right there. Sorry.
right here.
Yeah.
It's like chest
Pass
level.
back and forth.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, you should be good.
Okay. So hope everyone's doing well today. So today we're presenting on RailRoad Bandit, which is about a recent vulnerability found in Ruby on Rails, CV 2019-5418. And to start things off, who am I? I'm a second year. Windows and web are pretty cool. I can't wait. No, April 26th, new Thanos memes are coming out. Gonna be pretty good. I hate Python too, with a passion. And I enjoy harvesting crops on a farm. I'll leave you to think about what that is.
Hello, everyone. So, who am I? I introduced myself probably to a lot of you as Vader with a B. I think that's a way for people to know how to pronounce my name, Vader. So, I'm a big fan of Linux. I've been using it for a while. By the way, I use Arch Linux. You can check out my .dov files on GitHub. I'm not eBoard's favorite member for reasons you all know probably by now. Blah, blah, privacy. Ducks are now my thing. I'm a workplace meme by now, and Bibu keeps sending me videos about ducks, so I embraced it. Yeah. So what we're talking about today is RailRoad Bandit. That's for Ruby on Rails. So what is Ruby on Rails? So Rails is a web framework for Ruby. So think of it as like Flask or Django for Python. It's an MVC framework, so model view controller. Think back of CS2, yeah. It uses dry principle, do not repeat yourself, convention over configurations. You don't have to configure a lot of files to make your services work. You just need to use the convention of Ruby programming. Ruby is a dynamic, interpreted, reflective, objective-oriented language. So Rails is used, if you're not familiar, it's used actually in a lot of web applications that we use every day, from GitHub, Shopify, Hulu uses it, SoundCloud, and a lot of other services as well. So it's very popular and used a lot.
So going into a little more technicality about what the CVE recently was, this came out about like 3 weeks ago, and it's pretty trivial to actually exploit. So this was due to how Ruby on Rails renders files, and this affected all versions of Ruby on Rails. And basically, you can craft special accept headers in a GET request, and it's similar to like a null byte escape where you put the path of the file, and you basically just escape it with two left curly braces, and this leads to an arbitrary file being rendered on the system. And this was basically this was due to a call in their render function on Ruby on Rails, and this was patched about 3 weeks ago. And if you look like towards the bottom, it's the code. It's basically just sanitizing the accept header to make sure this vulnerability doesn't happen anymore.
So this vulnerability is a path traversal vulnerability. So it aims to access files and directories that are stored outside the web root directory. So Ruby on Rails, when you install it, there's like a main directory where like the web application actually runs from. But the way Rails does rendering for files is that to find the format of the file, because you can render multiple formats, it actually goes outside the root directory. And that allows you to actually render different files on the system that you're not supposed to have access to. It's an OSAP top 10, number 5, broken access control.
So just to make things a little more like tailored towards Ruby on Rails. So of course, like if it's a Linux box, you know, you want to read like etc password, maybe bash history, stuff like that. But just to like cater it towards more on like Ruby on Rails. Ruby on Rails actually has a lot of sensitive information hiding in there. The problem is finding out where. But if you have access to just reading files on the server and you know it's running Ruby on Rails, you want to read stuff like the database, YAML files, secret tokens, and basically this is where like the databases are stored. You can figure out database environment passwords and usernames, and you can even find like real data in like their SQLite files if you poke hard enough. And here's how to reproduce it.
Okay, so this is how I set up the website for the demo. So all you need to do is install Ruby on Rails, and then you can create a new controller to render the file, but you also can use the main controller that exists there by default, which is called the application controller. If you go to the main website, that will be rendered. So all you see here, like all I changed, if you open the default like configuration for Ruby, all I did is like add the red line in the middle that says like render. Oh, sorry, yeah. Wrong color choice. But all it says is like render a file, and then the path to the file, it starts with rails.root, so it's inside the root application directory for the web app, and then /public, so the public-facing data, and then a folder I named it Bandit, and then bandit.html. So it's basically just rendering an HTML file. That's all it's doing. You could generate a new controller using the command rails generate controller, and then the name of the controller. And then you need to create a route. So the way Ruby does rendering, you need to like tell it where, when to render the file. So in the route file for it, I define in the beginning root application, and that's the name of like the variable for it. And then it gets that file and just render it on the website. That's all it's doing here. So actually, I did not install Ruby manually because I used DigitalOcean and I had credit on it, and they actually have pre-made images already. So I was like, instead of installing it manually, why don't see if like the actual DigitalOcean image is vulnerable? And it is actually. So all I had to do is deploy one pre-made image from DigitalOcean. And if you notice, it says new, and this is like on Ubuntu 18.4. So this is literally, if you go and install Ruby on Rails, your server will be vulnerable to this right now.
Hardest part of the day, demo time. So hopefully it works, fingers crossed. So what we're basically doing is we're basically exploiting Bader's website with permission from him. So basically what we're doing is, as shown earlier with the reproduction steps, when he's rendering the root file, like the HTML, we're basically going to escape that and render any file in the system. So I basically create a proof of concept script when this first came out, hoping it gets an exploit DB very soon, it gets verified. But what it basically does is it just automates the process for you. So what we're going to do is, fingers crossed and it works. Does this look fine, or should I make it bigger?
Definitely. Just remember, the bottom corner of your screen is visible on the screen.
That's fine. Good enough? Okay. So what we're going to do is basically, we're going to grab the URL, and I'm already in the directory, Python 3, of course. And then we're going to, oh, thanks, Windows. So now we're going to give it the, so now it's basically just a menu, so we can see what password, or what stuff we want to read on the system. So now we want the server to, like, for example, we want it to render Etsy password instead. So now we're basically just making it read any file in the system as the user Rails. So if we scroll down towards the bottom, we see that the Rails user, we see their home directory. And take, for example, as well, if we know their home directory, it's pretty easy to figure out where their bash history is. So let's say we want to read like the bash history, for example. So this is all the history we've done. There's some cool art. And it's basically just like, for example, if you can read the history, there could be sensitive information here. You can see everything we did. You can see the struggle of figuring this out. And just recently, there's also proxy CPU info that can figure out if you're like in a honeypot or not. So this would basically show like the information about the system you're on. And lastly, I very just recently tested this out. I had a brute force method. So going back to like those sensitive files we wanted to read earlier, like the database YAML and stuff like that, it's basically just brute forcing the name of the directory, because on the server, the home directory is home/rails/example/like config database YAML. That's where the stuff is. So we can easily just take a common directory name, like a dictionary attack, and basically just brute force the method. So now we're just going to brute force, for example, like database YAML. And this is basically just going through a word list and testing each one to see if the file exists. So now we basically, we dumped the config database YAML, and I'll show you the code in a second as well. So this basically just explains what the server is. And if we scroll all the way down, you could see towards the bottom, oh, I guess I'll make it bigger since the bottom left is canceled. You can see the password for our database, as well as the username. So you can have fun with it if you wanted to. But here's the code. I'm going to open it in Vim. So it's pretty simple, actually, the vulnerability. So basically, the most important part is like right here. So basically, the headers, it's pretty simple to replicate. all you need to do is go to the craft a special accept header with a file plus 2 curly braces to the left. And after that, it's as simple as just doing path traversal towards the bottom. For example, the menu, just do path traversal, so // and just read etc password, the bash history, as simple as that. And that's pretty much it. I'm glad the demo didn't crash. So now back to the slides. So at the end of the day, like takeaways in the future, it's always good to keep up to date with the news. Twitter's a great place for it. ExploitDB, always new vulnerabilities. ZDNet, good stuff to read. Workplace news section always has some good stuff. Writing proof of concept code is fun. You could always send to ExploitDB with search exploit, and that's always a good time. And just for like the future, I might try and integrate this with Shodan. Although using it with Shodan and like putting it out there, that is pretty illegal actually. So be careful about that, like exploiting other people.
Don't do it.
That's actually I should put this, that's illegal, by the way. If I put a Shodan method and other people use it, that's on them. But if I use it, that actually is illegal. And then this was a little old, but I did figure out finally a brute forcing method. That's already, the future's already been the future's now. So here's any questions. If not, thank you.